And so one of the first matters I got up there was that coroner's inquest, because in those days the coroners weren't specialists. Every magistrate was a coroner, and it was just part of the general duties. The incident of the Lonergans is quite well known. It was very controversial. There was a lot of international media coverage. They went diving up on the Barrier Reef, St Crispin's Reef, in 1998, and they had 3 dives that day, and it was the weekend crew on the dive tour, and they got left behind, and all their gear was left on the boat. But it wasn't picked up for 2 days when someone from their accommodation started ringing and saying, well, do you know where they are? And then they realised that their personal gear was still left on the boat. And then they looked at the log. So divers were expected to sign a log on return, and their names were missing.
Well, what was it like, though, to have all that media attention directed towards you as the coroner in that case?
Well, I did a view, which I was used to because I did planning and environment court work as a barrister. But they were rare in those days, where you would actually go out and have a look at the scene. And I made the mistake of wearing a Hawaiian shirt going out, and I got photographed, and I was on the front page of the Courier Mail in my Speedos too, as well. So it looked to everyone, the powers that be in the magistrates' court, that I was having a good time out at the reef. But it was incredibly valuable to go out there. They wouldn't let us dive at the site. I had my diving certification by then, but they allowed us to snorkel over the site, and there were a couple of pontoons long way in the distance, and the suggestion was they could have swam. There was also the suggestion that they'd faked their own disappearance, and that it was a murder-suicide. The dive industry in Cairns didn't react very well. They were very defensive, as there were a litany of negligent mistakes made by the people on that boat that were supposed to be taking them. The Lonergans, it turned out, were very good divers who liked to stay underwater as long as possible. And this was an unusual dive because it offered 3 dives in the one day out of Port Douglas. Most of them only offered 2 dives. So they were attracted to that. And unfortunately, they got left behind, and there was all sorts, as I said, of speculation as to what had happened to him, and some unfortunate things were said in his diary. But after a week of an inquest, which happened quite quickly, really, it was in September, after they'd disappeared in January, went for a week, and then I gave the decision about a week later, and found that they'd probably been taken by a shark or drowned, a tiger shark, and that they hadn't faked their own disappearance. It was just ridiculous theory, and they hadn't accessed any of their money, for instance, or bank accounts or insurance policies, and they were a happy, young, loving couple. So the idea of murder-suicide was also ridiculous. So, but that was controversial at the time, and then I charged the manager of the company and he was the captain on the boat on that day with manslaughter, which you could do in those days. And he went to trial, and it eventually had an 11-day trial before the Supreme Court in Cairns, and was acquitted. I think juries are reluctant to find someone guilty of manslaughter when what it really means is criminal negligence causing death. But local juries tend to be sympathetic to defendants in those sort of cases, because they often see it as a civil issue, negligence.
Well, I think also because they could see themselves doing something, that might be really terrible in hindsight, but they think, I can see myself in that situation.
Yes.
So, oh well, that and the media attention, except for have you still got the pictures of the speedos?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Well, it wasn't just me; it was counsel assisting and a defence lawyer. But
They were all in
I had a
speedos
rashy.
too.
I had a rashy on as well. So. But yeah. But one interesting thing arising out of that was that in those days, witnesses could claim privilege against self-incrimination. So often your key witnesses would hop in the witness box and not give any evidence. They just claim privilege because it may incriminate them. It's a wide privilege and may incriminate. So like all the people on the boat, including the dive captain and the staff, didn't give evidence. They just claimed privilege. So I recommended to the Attorney General at the time, Matt Foley, that the law be changed so that they had to answer questions, they had to give evidence, but that evidence couldn't be used against them in criminal proceedings. And that was implemented that amendment was made to the Act. So I take credit for changing the practice of the coroner's court.
Well, that's not a bad legacy.
Yeah, like how are you expected to find out what went wrong and to make recommendations to improve the system when the key witnesses don't have to give evidence?
So were there improvements made to the system, like particularly in the dive industry, their processes and procedures as a result of that inquest?
Yes, there were all sorts of improvements made. I think the dive industry, it's a big employer, not during COVID times, but in normal international visitor times in Cairns, it's a big employer of people. A lot of people go to Cairns to they get their dive certificate. It is a big industry, and it has regularly people dying from even snorkeling deaths up on the reef.